violinists for the orchestra, and maybe some solos. Wonderful. Thank you both for being here. Our scripture this morning comes from Genesis, at the very beginning, actually, of our Bible. And I'm taking it from the Message by Eugene Peterson. God told Abram, "Leave your country, your family, and your father's home for a land that I will show you. I'll make you a great nation and bless you. I'll make you famous. You'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I'll curse. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram left just as God said, and Lot left with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot with him, along with all the possessions and people they had gotten in Haran, and set out for the land of Canaan and lived safe and sound. Abram passed through the country as far as Shechem and the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites occupied the land. God appeared to Abram and said, "I will give this land to your children." Abram built an altar at the place where God had appeared to him. He moved on from there to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent between Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. He built an altar there and prayed to God. Abram kept moving, steadily making his way south to the Negev. Remember that old adage, there are only two things you can be certain of in life. What are they? Taxes. What's the other? Death. Yes, taxes and death. At least that holds true in the developed Western world. I would add one more certainty to that list. Nothing in life ever remains the same. All of life, down to the tiniest cells in our bodies, are in a state of perpetual change. We barely notice much of that change in our day-to-day existence. A while back, I gave Maureen cuttings from one of the plants on my back porch. It was looking rather spindly, and so I cut it back to the naked stems and a couple of leaves, not very attractive. And recently, she pointed out all the new life that had appeared. Where did all those leaves come from? And her cuttings now have roots and are ready to be planted. Out of one plant given to me by Betsy Thiel, it has now produced 4 plants over the years. Change can happen slowly, in increments, or in a split second, or a matter of hours. The lives, think about it, the lives of thousands of people this past week on the Gulf Coast have been changed. None of us know for certain what's going to happen a minute from now, let alone a month. I think of my friend Dan, who was watching television with his wife. One evening decided it was time to retire for the evening, walked into the bedroom. A few minutes later, walked back and said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." He collapsed and died in front of her. Or their son, a couple of years earlier, who was killed in an automobile accident driving on the LA freeways on his way to college one morning. Life is precious. Don't waste it. Events, some of them out of our control, some of them we make conscious decisions about, can change the course of our lives forever births, relationships, marriage, and families, school, moving, career changes, lost employment, illnesses, death, all a part of the life cycle. Big changes frequently elicit a certain amount of fear and apprehension, doubt and questioning. Am I doing the right thing? How will this change affect others in my life? There can also be sadness and a grieving process involved whenever you let go of part of your life to make room for something new. But these times can also be filled with excitement. You know, the joy of new discoveries and possibilities, growth, new relationships and learning opportunities. Change allows new life to happen. Those big, I mean in capital letters, big changes, ones where I feel I'm being called to change course, aren't made in a split second or even overnight. They come after a period of careful discernment. They come after a period of prayer and meditation. Being a person of faith, I know I'm not alone in the process. I don't think of God as a puppeteer up there in the clouds, pulling strings and moving us in one direction or another. But I do believe that God's infinite love and wisdom and guidance is there for all of us to tap into. The Hebrew Scriptures, in particular, are filled with stories of God calling prophets and leaders and ordinary, unsuspecting folks in their tents. Hey, listen up. This is what I want you to do. This is where I want you to go. We're not used to God talking to us today. Those who claim God is, we're highly suspect of. They didn't have as many distractions back then as we do now. No smartphones, TVs, iPads, emails, or Twitter. It was really quiet in that desert. Believe me, I've been there. I know. So maybe it was easier to hear the voice of God. Abram heard the voice of God. Now, I think there had to have been more to this story and this conversation that what we're given here. More than Abram, leave your country and your family and your father's home, and I will show you where to go. Okay, fine. Now, God did pile on the incentives. I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you. I'll make you famous. I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Not bad. But you notice in the story that later, Abram did take his wife, his nephew, all his possessions and people with him. He didn't leave empty-handed. No. Like all of us listening to God and trying to follow where God is leading us, Abram must have been filled with some fear and apprehension and doubt. This was one of those big, big life changes, not like changing your internet provider. You want me to do what? Go where? Are you kidding? I'm 75 years old. Have you been out in that desert? I mean, it's not very inviting, lousy weather. And I like it here. I've got my family and friends and livestock. I have a life. Get on the camel, Abram. Let's go. Go where? I'll show you. I want specifics. Don't you trust me? As long as I'm with you, Abram, you won't get lost. You got something better to do? I didn't think so. Let's follow me. Abram didn't know where God was leading him. And as I begin my search for a new ministry, neither do I. My challenge is allowing God in the car with me, pointing out directions. I tend to want to take the lead. I have to remind myself to listen. How do we hear God's voice over all the competing voices in our lives? For that matter, how do we know it is God's voice? I mean, if I had the answer to that, I could probably retire. But in lieu of an answer, I have some hints, some tools that have been given to me over the years. And it begins with listening. Last week, Libby preached on the story of Elijah from 1 Kings. I can't tell you how nice it was to sit back and listen to someone else unpack the gospel, or not the gospel in that case, but the scriptures. So much of that story resonated with me. But what really stuck was Elijah's listening for the voice of God. He's standing on a mountain, waiting for God to pass by. He witnesses a great wind, a wind so strong that it's splitting mountains and it's tossing rocks around. But God wasn't in the wind. Next, there was an earthquake and a fire, but God wasn't in either of those. God was in the sheer, absolute silence that followed the storms. It was in that silence that Elijah finally heard God's voice and recognized God's presence. It's a metaphor for our lives, isn't it? Our lives are filled at one time or another with storms. The Hurricane Isaac variety, or the chaos that erupts from the loss of a job, a failed business, rocky relationships, illnesses, and the death of people close to us. You can't escape it. And in the midst of the chaos and the fear it inflicts, it can be hard to hear the voice of God calling. It can be difficult to feel God's presence. Many times, it's only in retrospect that you realize that God was there with you through it all. But to truly hear and decipher where God is calling us, we have to be still. Listen. Pay attention. Not only to that still small voice that manages to get through once in a while, but to the many ways and the many people that God is speaking to us through. Over 10 years ago, when I was discerning if God was leading me to seminary, my mentor suggested that we read together an absolutely inspiring book called Callings by Greg Lavoie. I highly recommend it to anyone who is making major life changes. It helped me to listen carefully to all the ways God was speaking to me. Lavoie had me write down, first, all of my fears, and then all the ways I was being called. My dreams and daydreams, the clutter in my mind as I tried to meditate, what my family and mentors and friends were saying to me, stories and good advice that arrived unsolicited on my email. We all get that. A sermon, scripture, daily devotionals that spoke to me, synchronicity that was happening in my life, hopes, emotions, the books I was reading, or those that remained unopened on my nightstand. The list went on and on. My sister at the time had just sent me 2 books, both of them about female ministers. This wasn't like my sister. She had no idea what I was thinking. God works in mysterious ways. My fears, they covered 1/3 of a page. The ways that I was being called went on for 2.5 pages. Try it sometime. Look at it all. What does it tell you? God is still speaking. Anne Lamott, in Traveling Mercies, her delightful, moving chronicle of her life and faith journey tells of advice that was given to her by a priest friend when she was making a life-changing decision. She was a single mom and pregnant and trying to decide what to do. He told her to spend some quiet time in meditation and imagine how she would feel if she aborted this child and how she would feel if she didn't. Our bodies, our emotions tell us so much. They too need to be listened to. I'm happy to report that her son is now a grown man and just had a child of his own. It's amazing what happens when you move through the storms, the chaos, the fears in your life and finally get to that quiet place that Elijah came to, where the clutter in your mind is removed and you can hear and know what God is trying to tell you. There is a sense of peace and calm that comes over you. That is when I know God is with me, guiding, and I am following. It gives you wings to fly. A friend of mine sent me a little bit of unsolicited Celtic wisdom the other week, and I printed it as the centering thought in the bulletin today. Be a full bucket, drawn up the dark way of the well. Something lifts you up into the light and shows you your wings. A full cup is set before you. You taste only sacredness. This must have been what Abram felt when he built those altars at places where God had appeared to him. As you, as all of you, embark on this next journey together as the community church of Atascadero, you will need to invite God along with you. You will need to do a lot of praying and listening. You will need sometimes to listen in silence to that still speaking God. You will need to listen to each other. You will need to listen to others outside of the church, mentors who will guide you and give you advice. You will need to listen to the voices that appear in the profiles that you will read of interim ministers who would like to guide you on this journey. There will be times of fear and apprehension and uncertainty, but there will also be times of excitement as you open your eyes to allow all the new and see all the new possibilities and opportunities that lie in the road ahead. And then a calmness will come over you as you realize that God has been with you through it all. And you have made the right decision. And the future is there, waiting with infinite possibilities. Change is a part of life. Embrace it. It is our prayer time. And so I invite anyone to reach out to each other, you guys that are new here, reach out and you take each other by the hand or arm and connect all together. Here, I'll connect with our moms back there. And we give each other a silent blessing. And a blessing is wishing well for that person. And as Sally plays I invite anyone to come up and light a candle for your special prayer request today.